Good afternoon, North Point of View, here with Dr. Walter Kemmsies. Walter, good afternoon.
Hey Mark, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm great.
I tell you what, I'm gonna roll up my shirt sleeves and we're gonna dig into China right now.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's an ongoing conversation, and we've drawn some lines about how far we're gonna go, right? In terms of this podcast. But I mean, we can start with something just as simple as, their COVID, policy right now and the vaccines and all that. You want to start there?
Yeah, let's start with that, and then we'll work our way backwards.
Okay.
But and we'll talk in a little bit just about because Xi Jinping has just given his acceptance speech for his third term.
Yeah.
So he's now, dictator for life.
He keeps nominating himself, and he keeps approving that nomination.
Exactly.
Right?
So, but let's talk about the COVID. So, in China, the two Chinese companies, one is called Sinovac, and I can't remember the name of the other one, Chinavac maybe, but basically they used dead viruses like we did in the original polio vaccines to come up with a vaccine that's barely 50% effective against COVID. And they did not have, or at least President, Xi did not have the face to be able to say, this stuff sucks. And instead of locking people up every time some outbreak occurs, just go buy the vaccine like all the other countries have.
Yeah.
Now, it did work a little bit in places like Chile. They actually got over COVID, but there everybody got vaccinated and everybody wore masks and they washed their hands. And so, it kind of worked in Chile, but it's not working in China. It's a stupid policy. It's based on nonsense to do this, lock people up every time there's a surge in COVID.
Well, and it just seems to me it's like a reflection of even what I see in their housing market. I mean, they're pushing this sort of narrative or propaganda, and it's hollow right behind it, right? It's like a movie set.
Exactly. All those ghost cities
that
got built. They created a housing bubble 30 years ago, and they use home building as a way to hold up GDP, make GDP growth appear higher than it really is.
Right.
And but for a lot of the Chinese, where do you save your money? Do you hold on to the yuan? No. China, the government could create inflation overnight, and your wealth is gone. Buy stocks. The financial markets in China are so manipulated that nobody would do that.
Right.
So you buy real estate like Americans do.
Yeah.
Buy your home, buy another home, you could rent it out, get some income from that, take care of yourself in your old age. And the Communist Party, and we should not say China because China is a wonderful country, lovely people.
Yes.
The Communist Party, which is another animal altogether, they have upset that. So a lot of people have lost their life savings because as you have financial problems, the weaker banks have folded. So there are a couple rural banks that are done, and they don't have deposit insurance. So people who had money at those banks have lost a lot of money.
Yeah, and a lot of it happens on the black market, right? The trading of the
Exactly.
currency. Yeah.
So, so that's two black marks in this guy's record. There are more black marks, but those two are pretty bad. They keep throwing people out of their homes because of COVID. They want to isolate people. That's expropriation. And then, they leave people with no place to save their money. I mean, what an awful government this is.
And so what, I know this is an open-ended question, but what could be their end game at this point?
The stated end game is to be the world's #1 superpower. And I think what they'll find out the hard way is the whole world does not want China to be the #1 superpower under this regime. If it was under a democratic regime, that'd be a different matter. But under this group of thugs, no. Who would want, Xi Jinping as the most powerful person in the world?
Yeah, and as you read through, and I've really, in the last 6 months, started to read more about really what happens inside that country and through the Communist Party, the control that they have over people's lives.
Right.
Like every step of their day is monitored. I think that unfortunately, there seems to be a convergence at some point, right, where there's some kind of battleground, and I guess at this point it's mainly economic, right?
Yeah.
But what does their economy look like in 5 years or 10 years, according to your predictions?
It does not look good. The population has aged. The working age population started to decline in 2016. And when you break it down, there's two things that drive economic growth. The growth of the working age population, more people making things, and the productivity of these workers. And so China is running into a people problem, just like we are, but they're further ahead in the curve. They are trying to automate a lot of things with robotics. China is the largest market in the world for robotics, but we've talked about this before. The automation technology just isn't there. I mean,
that's for our next podcast.
Yeah,
You got some interesting stats on that.
Yeah, that's just not working for them. So, and we've seen for over 10 years low-skilled jobs, low-value-added jobs for labor, leaving China and moving towards Vietnam and other countries, but Vietnam primarily because they had the labor force for it. You'd wonder how come they don't push the jobs into the rural part of China, but when you leave the coast of China and you go inland, it's like China 1950 all over again. Yeah. Extreme poverty, starvation, it's not good. So that's why the jobs leave the coastal provinces and they shift to other countries.
Is there a bright spot? Is there a lens that you can look through that sort of gives, for the way we look at their existence, sort of a best possible scenario?
Yeah, Xi goes away. We don't know where he goes, but we don't want him where he is right now. And the Communist Party breaks down into different political parties, which is how it works currently. You have different factions in there, so they could become different political parties. And as a consequence, you get a democracy. I mean, China, the literacy rate is very, very high. The education levels are very good. You've got a population that's used to hard work. It's got all the ingredients, for being a great country, except it doesn't have a government. It's got a mafia, kind of running things.
Yeah.
And you take that out, and I can imagine that China would, if China did what America has asked China to do when China joined the WTO, China would today be the world's largest superpower. I mean, it would be a tremendous country to live in. But because you have the Communist Party, and they're doing the opposite of what we said, we told them, be more like us, be a democracy, let your people free. Because they haven't done that, they're trying to become the world's #1 superpower through all kinds of nefarious things.
Right.
Like we were reading this week, they're hiring British RAF pilots, the Royal Air Force pilots, to go train their people, paying them £240,000 a year.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. And so, and why? You're going to have a bunch of pilots and you're going to take over the world with that? Nah. You want to take over the world? Power comes from the economy, not from the politics.
Yeah. Well, on that note, you're the man when it comes to economics, so appreciate your time. Always great being with you, Walter.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Let's do it soon.
Yes.
All right. See you guys.